Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's Friday and Pakistan has released a sequel. Another bailout request. Reports say they will ask for $6 billion and the IMF may grant it. Not surprising, yet it begs the question why? Why do Western-led agencies continue to fund the terror state of Pakistan? How do they overlook rigged elections and the army's nefarious designs? We'll discuss all of that and more. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin had a Top Gun moment, flying a fighter jet and taking a jibe at Joe Biden. An AI chatbot was asked about Modi and Zelensky. Guess which one was labelled a fascist? A new social media IPO is making waves. We'll tell you all about Reddit. And the US moon landing after 50 years, the first by a private company. Why the world's rich and famous are set to land in Jamnagar in Gujarat. How some Indians in Russia were forced to fight against Ukraine. What made Libya's armed groups leave the capital Tripoli? What are digital nomad visas and why is Japan giving them? Also, what is upcycled food? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proposes a plan for post-war Gaza in which local Palestinian officials without links to Hamas will govern the territory. It calls for a complete demilitarization of Gaza and dismantling of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The proposal has already been rejected by the Palestinian Authority. India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives hold a trilateral drill in the Indian Ocean. The 4-day Dosti 16 exercise is to enhance maritime security. Bangladesh is also participating as an observer. This comes at a time when a so-called Chinese research vessel is anchored near the Malé port. No takers for Senegal president's dialogue offer. Presidential contenders rejected, refusing to take part in talks proposed by President Macky Sall. The president's decision to delay election till December has sparked widespread protests in the country. Hungary strikes a fighter jet deal with Sweden. The announcement comes ahead of a key vote on Stockholm's NATO bid. After Turkey's ratification last month, Hungary remains the last obstacle to Sweden's NATO membership. And South Korea raises its public health alert to the highest level. It comes after thousands of doctors resigned over proposed medical reforms. The government says the mass resignation is unlawful. In South Korea, doctors are considered essential workers. The law restricts them from going on strike. Some things never change, like where the sun rises and sets, the taste of water, the mortality of humans, and in Pakistan's case, the need for loans. Looks like another one is in the work. Reports say Pakistan's new government will seek another bailout from the IMF. That's the International Monetary Fund. And how much money do they want? Around $6 billion. Now, this raises a couple of questions. One, where is the new government? And two, why does Pakistan want more money? To answer the first one, a coalition agreement has been struck. The Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, PMLN, has joined hands with the Pakistan People's Party, PPP, basically the Sharifs plus the Bhutto Zardaris. Shehbaz Sharif has been picked to become the Prime Minister. He held the same post last year as well. But the PPP will not be joining the cabinet. They will support the government from the outside. And what do they get in return? The next president will be their pick. The PPP has named Asif Ali Zardari, the father of Bilawal Bhutto. He'll be the president of Pakistan. So that's where government formation is at. We don't have a date for the swearing in, but chances are it will happen before this month ends. Now we come to the next question. Why does Pakistan need another bailout? They got one just last June, a $3 billion assistance program. So why the new loan? Because Pakistan has too many payments to make, some $25 billion in the next financial year. That's 3 times their foreign exchange reserves. So in simple words, Pakistan doesn't have money. No bailout, no payments. Which brings us to the third question. Has the bailout application been made yet? Not yet. First, the new government has to take charge. Only then can the application be made. And will the IMF accept it? This is what the fund has said. And I'm quoting, "The IMF is available if requested to support the post-election government through a new arrangement to address Pakistan's ongoing challenges." Now, to be honest, we knew this would happen. Pakistan's economy is in very bad shape. One bailout was never going to be enough. But that's not our story tonight. Our story is the IMF's willingness to keep playing this game. Just think about it. What legitimacy does this new government in Pakistan have? These parties were on course to lose the election. Imran Khan's independents were in pole position, but then magic happened. In other words, the army intervened. Even top Pakistani officials have admitted this. They've said the elections were rigged. Yet the IMF says, we will work with Pakistan. What message does that send? You can rig the elections, you can stuff ballot boxes, you can cut off the internet, but the IMF will keep supporting you. It will fund your subversion of democracy. Is anyone pushing back against this? Apparently Imran Khan is. He's planning to write a letter to the IMF from jail. Reports say he will ask the fund to withhold the cash, to not give the bailout. But his party leaders have dismissed these reports. They say Imran Khan will never work against Pakistan's interests. Well, whatever he does, the IMF won't care. It is an agency founded by and working for the West. And the West is a key ally of Pakistan's military. Just consider this. The US is the biggest voting power in the IMF. It holds around 16% of the votes. Then you have American allies in Europe. Together, they hold almost 40% of the votes, 4-0. So any IMF decision needs Western blessings, and so far they've given it to Pakistan. Pakistan has received 23 bailouts from the IMF, 23 bailouts in 7 decades, and now they're set to ask for yet another one. At what point does the IMF realize what's happening here? This money is not helping the people of Pakistan. It's feeding a broken system, a system where the army supports terrorists, a system where democracy is subverted, and a system where corruption is rife. Does the IMF want to keep funding this? If so, they're no different from the Pakistan army, we say. The generals do the dirty work. The IMF funds that dirty work. Now let's turn our attention to Russia. Tomorrow is the 24th of February, the 2-year anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. No side is close to winning it, but Moscow is celebrating. It recently scored a victory. It captured the Ukrainian city of Avdiivka. And this is significant. It gives momentum to Moscow. How will the West counter that? Through the old weapon that seldom works, and that's sanctions. The West is bringing in new sanctions supposedly to hurt Russia's war machine and punish President Vladimir Putin, both for the war and the death of his critic Alexei Navalny. He died in a Russian prison last week. Today, Biden met his family.
This morning I had the honor of meeting with Alexei Navalny's wife and daughter. As to state the obvious, he was a man of incredible courage. And it's amazing how his wife and daughter are emulating that. And we're going to be announcing the sanctions against Putin, who is responsible for his death, tomorrow.
The US president has vowed to tighten the screws. Reports say that the US alone is imposing sanctions on 500 targets. It adds to thousands of others already in place against Russia. Will these new sanctions finally change Putin's mind? Very unlikely. In fact, he seems to be doubling down in typical Putin style. Russian media has released new footage. Vladimir Putin in Top Gun mode, flying around in a nuclear-capable bomber. The dash cam shows him in the co-pilot seat. Take a look at this. He's in a Russian Tu-160M bomber. The aircraft can carry 12 nuclear missiles and travel a distance of 12,000 kilometers. NATO has codenamed them Blackjacks. Why is this a big deal, though? The optics are great, plus it shows Putin is fit and in control. So much for all the Western reports/rumors that emerge every once in a while suggesting that the Russian president is dying. Remember, Putin is 71 years old, no spring chicken, and yet he was in the co-pilot seat. Now, when you fly a jet like that, you need a certain level of physical fitness, heart health, blood pressure, the ability to withstand gravitational force or G-force that only professional fighter pilots are trained for. Putin was on this flight for about half an hour, which is quite a feat at the age of 71. His sortie proves that age has not gotten to him yet. He's still maintaining his strongman image. Putin has leaned on this image regularly in the past. Pictures of him on horseback, of him practicing taekwondo, or of him in the wild in fatigues. The media regularly pushes these images, reinforcing his macho persona, pitting him against the seemingly softer leaders from the West. Putin seemed to be taking on the West yesterday too. Listen to what he said after the flight.
The machine is excellent. It is truly of a new generation. As I told the commander of the aircraft, and now I will say it again, and to the leadership of the Ministry of Defense. Of course, it can be accepted into the armed forces.
So the West is talking about sanctions. Putin is talking about adding more nuclear bombers to his arsenal, and doing that after flying in one of the jets. It's a clear shot at his adversaries and some posturing for his domestic audience as well. Putin does have an election coming up after all. It doesn't hurt to look tough, even if there's no real opposition. After his Top Gun moment, Putin continued with the showmanship. He drove a Russian-made Kamaz truck. Again, Putin putting emphasis on the strongman persona. Was this a shot at US President Joe Biden, known more for his bicycle rides or for stumbling while climbing stairs? Biden is 81. He has a decade on Putin. Putin was also once a part of the KGB, the Russian Secret Service. Biden did not get that kind of training in his youth, so it's not exactly a fair comparison, but this comparison will be made because they are adversaries, leaders of their respective countries, and often in news for targeting each other. Yesterday, Biden called Putin a crazy SOB. Now, Putin has responded. Listen to this.
Listen, we talked not long ago, and you asked who would be preferred as the future president of the United States. I said that we would work with any president, but I suppose that for us, for Russia, Biden is more preferable. Judging by what he has said, I was absolutely right, because this was an adequate reaction to what I had said. Why? Because he cannot say, Volodya, you are a good man. You've helped me a lot. We understand what is going on there in terms of politics, and that reaction is absolutely adequate. This means that I was right. What I said was for our audience first and foremost, not for Americans. You are a Russian journalist after all, and you asked what was better for us. So I told you then, and I can confirm and repeat it now. Biden is better.
Putin said Biden's reaction was absolutely adequate and that it proved that Biden was better for Russia. That has to sting. Will Biden's new sanctions return the favor, or will Vladimir Putin keep frustrating the West and flying rings around them? We'll have to wait and see. For our next story, let me ask you a question. Can machines be biased? Well, it depends on who you ask. When you think machines, you think impartial, without emotions, without biases. But is that really true? Let me show you something. This is Gemini, Google's AI chatbot, much like their version of ChatGPT. A viral post showed a user asking Gemini a question. Is Indian Prime Minister Modi a fascist? Look at the response. And I'm quoting, Narendra Modi is the current Prime Minister of India and leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He has been accused of implementing policies that experts characterize as fascist. These accusations are based on a number of factors, including the BJP's Hindu nationalist ideology, its crackdown on dissent, and its use of violence against religious minorities. That's what Gemini said. Then the same bot was asked about Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. The same question. Is Zelensky a fascist? Now look at what Gemini said, and I'm quoting again. Whether Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is a fascist is a complex and highly contested question with no simple answer. It is crucial to approach this topic with nuance and consider various perspectives. Well, we agree. It is a complex question. It should be addressed with nuance. But why did Gemini not show this nuance in the first instance? It had no problem saying that the Indian Prime Minister was accused of being a fascist. No nuance there. But with Zelensky, it's suddenly about complexity and nuance. If this isn't bias, I wonder what is. India has taken note of this issue. It has raised it with Google. The IT minister says it violates several provisions of India's criminal law. Now, this is a serious problem, and it's not limited to Gemini or Google. At first glance, AI chatbots appear impartial. You ask them something, and they give you an answer. But it's not really that simple. AI chatbots are biased, and we can give you 3 reasons why. The first bias is in data. You see, chatbots train on data sets, so their response is based on which data they're fed. When data sets reflect societal stereotypes, AI does the same. For instance, imagine that you have a customer service chatbot. It's learning from interactions of employees. So if an employee is biased against, say, women, then chances are that the chatbot will do the same. That bias will transfer. Then there are contextual biases. AI chatbots operate within specific contexts like cultures, values, power dynamics. What is acceptable in one setting could be a problem in another. But chatbots do not know that. And then there is the feedback bias. Imagine a chatbot gives a biased reply, but the user loves it. That reinforces the bias. The chatbot starts giving more of it. So long story short, AI chatbots are far from neutral, and it's hardly a secret. Their creators know it. What are they doing to fix it then? Well, Google tried something with Gemini. It tried to make its chatbot, quote unquote, more woke. Didn't work. Gemini was asked to depict the founding fathers of the US. One response showed indigenous people in colonial outfits. Another showed George Washington as a black man. Imagine that. This is not a random question. This is a historical one. You cannot change history to be politically correct. Yet, yes, AI has been accused of racial bias, and Google may have tried to change that. But you cannot change the ethnicity of George Washington. He existed in real life, and he was a white man. The Apollo 11 crew was shown featuring a black woman. Again, incorrect. US senators from the 1800s included a woman. But America got its first female senator only in 1922. So Gemini is getting history wrong as it tries to be woke. Google says it's not working properly. It has paused its image tool after the backlash. And all of this is problematic because on one side you have inbuilt bias, on the other an attempt to be too inclusive or woke. In a post-truth world, these technologies are becoming our source of information. They shape opinions and narratives. They can easily be misused and weaponized. Hence the need for AI sovereignty, which we keep talking about. We missed the bus with social media. We cannot do the same with artificial intelligence, or we'll have bots sitting in judgment, issuing certificates to leaders and deciding who's fascist and who's not. Staying with the internet, a social media giant is making its stock market debut. Reddit. I'm sure you've used it or heard of it. Reddit is different from platforms like Instagram or X, also a bit complicated. Reddit has communities for most topics, say religion or space or politics. A user, or Redditor as they're called, can post content on these communities. It can be a question or a thread or a media file, anything. Other users then engage and vote on it. More votes equal higher position. Reddit has a name for these votes as well. They're called karma. Unlike X or Instagram, Reddit posts tend to be more expansive and sometimes problematic. We'll get to that later. But first, let's talk about the numbers. Reddit is looking to sell 10% of its shares. The company will be listed on the New York Stock Exchange next month, and the offer price not determined yet. Now, before any IPO, You must disclose financial details, and Reddit has done the same. It has revealed some interesting details about its investors. At number 1 is Advance Magazine, the firm behind Condé Nast. They own 30% stake in Reddit. At number 2 is China's Tencent. They own 11% of Reddit. And at number 3 is a familiar name, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. He's got 8.7% of the company. Chances are he will get millions from this IPO. We'll get some more numbers out of the way. First is valuation. Reddit raised some money back in 2021. Back then, the company was valued at $10 billion. Next is profits. I'm afraid there isn't any. Reddit reported losses worth $91 million in 2023. But there is a saving grace. The year before, losses were much bigger, almost $158 million. So the losses are actually coming down. Finally, let's look at user base. It's the currency of every social media platform. Reddit has around 267 million active weekly users, 267 million weekly. They're part of 100,000 communities. So that's everything you need to know about the IPO. Now we come to the interesting bits. It's not every day that social media firms hit the stock market. The last one was in 2019. That's when Pinterest went public. Before that, you had Facebook and Twitter, or rather Meta and X. Meta debuted in 2012 for $38 per share. Guess how much it's worth now? Almost $490. So clearly it's been a success story, but Reddit is not just focused on the money. At least that's what they claim. The company is doing something unusual with this IPO. Usually the first offerings are made to institutions and investors. Reddit is doing something different. They're giving shares to their users, to these so-called Redditors. And how will they be selected? Based on their karma, believe it or not. So the top Redditors will have a chance to buy the shares. It's on point for the company because Reddit is all about loyal users, but this idea does have a downside. Listen to what the company is saying, and I'm quoting, Redditors' participation in this offering could result in increased volatility in the market price of our Class A common stock. Meaning, Redditors will make the prices volatile, yet the company is going ahead with it. And that's Reddit for you. Its origins are similar to other social media platforms, but the final product is very different. It was founded in a US college dormitory in 2005. It was meant for banter on culture, but it's now carved a niche for itself, one that is different from X or Instagram. It's not all good though. Reddit communities are sometimes a hub of conspiracy theories about science, about politics, about Hollywood, and of course, the moon landing. The platform does censor some of the content, but that censorship is highly divisive. One group says it's too much, the other says it's a must for all social media platforms. And with the IPO, all this will be amplified. There will be pressure from shareholders, new investors may bring in new politics. So the question is, can Reddit retain its unique identity? I guess we'll find out soon enough. And since we mentioned the moon landing, here's an update. A US spacecraft has landed on the moon, the first in 50 years. But it wasn't a NASA rocket that achieved this feat. It belonged to Houston-based Intuitive Machines. It's a private company, which makes this the first commercial spacecraft on the moon. What will it do there? It will conduct experiments for NASA. The landing has ushered in a new space age, one of commercial exploration. More and more private companies are going to space. How are they shaping the space race? Our next report tells you.
Today, for the first time in more than a half century, the U.S. has returned to the moon.
Ignition and liftoff.
The United States is back on the moon. The spacecraft is called Odysseus. It landed near the lunar South Pole. It's the first time since the Apollo era that America has returned to the moon. But the spacecraft doesn't have a NASA logo. It's because it belongs to this company, Houston-based Intuitive Machines. It was almost like a joint venture. The spacecraft belonged to Intuitive Machines. It was launched upon a SpaceX rocket. It carried NASA's scientific instruments. Sounds like a true collaboration. And that's what NASA has described it as.
Today, for the first time in more than a half century, the U.S. has returned to the moon. Today, for the first time in the history of humanity, a commercial company, an American company, launched and led the voyage up there. And today is a day that shows the power and promise of NASA's commercial partnerships. Congratulations to everyone involved in this great and daring quest at Intuitive Machines, SpaceX, and right here at NASA. What a triumph! Odysseus has taken the moon. This feat is a giant leap forward for all of humanity.
IM-1, Odysseus lunar lander.
So why is NASA outsourcing its job? During the Apollo era, NASA was given over $300 billion. The space agency got a blank check. It was allowed to do anything as long as the US was the leader in the space race. But times have changed, and there's pressure on America now to deliver success at a fraction of historic costs. Which brings us to commercial collaboration. Private companies are aiming for space, and the number is growing. It started with the success of SpaceX. The startup was once called Reckless, but soon became NASA's favorite contractor. Why? Because it makes sense monetarily. For NASA, a single space shuttle launch costs over $2 billion. But buying a seat on a SpaceX rocket, that's worth around $50 million. This way, NASA can conduct its research and also save money in the process. And it's not just America. It's happening in India too. Right now, the country has over 190 space startups, a number that has doubled since last year. Between 2021 and 2022, private investments in space have jumped by 77%. Hyderabad's Skyroot Aerospace launched India's first private rocket in 2022. Which brings us to the question, who will dominate the space race in the future? Will it be national space agencies or will it be private companies? Well, it's not a simple answer. We're in the next phase of space exploration. Countries are aiming for the sun and going back to the moon. But it's no longer a singular effort. They're doing it with the help of private companies. It's a true space collaboration at its heart.
The world's top businessmen are coming to India. But guess where they're coming? Not New Delhi, not Mumbai, not any of your big metro cities. They're coming to a town called Jamnagar in western India. Why? For a trailer to what is being called the wedding of the decade between Anant Ambani and Radhika Merchant. You may have heard of them. I'm sure you know the couple. Anant Ambani is the youngest son of Reliance chairman Mukesh Ambani. Radhika Merchant is the daughter of industrialist Viren Merchant. They're getting married in July this year. But next month is the pre-wedding festivities. Like I said, the trailer. All the events are being organized in Jamnagar city. Some big names are set to attend. Like Mohammed bin Jassim Al Thani, the Prime Minister of Qatar, Sultan Al Jaber, head of the UAE's biggest oil company, Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, Donald Harrison, President of Google, Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister of Canada, Ivanka Trump, daughter of Donald Trump, Shantanu Narayan, CEO of Adobe, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, Ted Pick, CEO of Morgan Stanley, and Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock. This is what the guest list looks like. These are some of the most powerful people in the world. They run multi-billion-dollar businesses, and all of them will be in Jamnagar. For a small city, that's a pretty big deal. There is an airport in Jamnagar. It usually handles around 10 flights per day. But on the 1st of March, it will handle 50. Many are calling it one of the biggest VIP gatherings in Indian history. The guest list itself tells a story. You have the Prime Minister of Qatar, a country that the Indian Prime Minister just visited. A country that is investing billions of dollars in India. You also have the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, the titans of the tech world. Both men are focusing on India. Meta, for example, says it is doubling down its business in India. You can understand why. We're a country of 1.4 billion people. So for a social media company, it's a huge market. Same for Disney. Their CEO will be attending the event next week. Again, it's a company that's keen on India. Disney productions earn a lot of money here. The streaming service is also quite popular. Finally, you have top bankers and investors. For them, India is a great bet. The stock market just beat Hong Kong in market valuation, and the projection is even better. Experts say Indian markets will top $10 trillion by 2030. And how big is it now? Around 4 trillion. So a lot of investors and bankers are keen on India. All these companies are looking for closer collaboration. They want to tie up with local firms to get to know the market and build something solid. I guess events like these help. They show that foreign firms are interested in India and Indian businesses. This event has all the makings of a big fat Indian wedding. Maybe 1,000 times. Such festivities are a key part of Indian society and nowadays Indian economy. Even the Prime Minister has talked about it. He's asked families to hold destination weddings inside India. You can understand why. It brings in a lot of investment. It can generate thousands of jobs. It also keeps Indian money inside India. So why not? Of course, the big question is around this event is this. If a pre-wedding looks like this, what will the wedding look like? I guess we'll find out in July. While the world is coming to India, the reverse is true as well, and sometimes with dangerous consequences. New reports have been doing the rounds about Indians who have gone to Russia. Reports say some Indians volunteered to work for the Russian army. They were to work in support jobs, but apparently they were duped. Once they got to Russia, the Indians were forced to fight against Ukraine. Their passports were allegedly snatched. They were handed weapons and sent to the front lines. India is now attempting to bring them back. The government has lodged a request with Russia asking for the early release of its citizens. Here's our report.
War brings death and destruction, but it also brings opportunities for self-enrichment. This has always been the case throughout history. That's why you have the term soldier of fortune. But it's not just about the fighters. Every army needs camp followers, a horde of support staff to help with logistics and supplies. This is as true today as it was during any other era, and that is the role some Indians wanted to fill in Russia. A few Indians believed they could get a job helping the Russian army. They were trying to find a post away from the front lines, so they reached out to agents, Indian middlemen who got them in touch with Russian forces. They apparently paid these middlemen a fee of about 3 lakh rupees. That's when they were told they had gotten their jobs. The Indians say they were promised back-end roles, with pay reaching almost 2 lakh rupees per month. They were also promised a 50,000 rupee monthly bonus. So the Indians caught a flight and arrived in Russia. They went from all over India: Uttar Pradesh, Telangana, Punjab, Gujarat, Jammu and Kashmir. The exact number hasn't been confirmed. The estimates range from between 10 to 21. But the fact is that there are Indians who went to Russia to get jobs as support staff. But once they arrived, that's when things went south. Some of the victims say their passports were confiscated. They were given some basic training in handling arms and ammunition. Then, about 2 months later, they were sent off to the front lines. Some were apparently shipped to Rostov-on-Don, others to Donetsk. The Indians were apparently forced to fight. And this is not what they had signed up for. They were supposed to be support staff, not cannon fodder. But they were deceived. Who lied to them? The agents or the Russians? The agents are pointing their fingers at Russian officials. They say people of other nationalities are trapped there too. Meanwhile, the Russians are yet to respond. But India isn't waiting around. The Indian government has reached out to Russia. It has asked that Indian nationals be discharged and be released from service early, in case they are under some legal contract. This may not solve the problem, however, because reports say some Indians aren't keen to return. They want to recover their 3 lakh joining fee before heading home, which causes a headache for the Indian government. They have now issued a new warning, urging all Indian nationals to exercise due caution and stay away from the conflict. Let's hope people heed the advice.
Now let's turn our attention to Libya, to its capital Tripoli, where residents may be about to get some relief. A new pact has been signed between the government and local militias. The militias may be leaving Tripoli, giving way to normal police officials.
After a month of consultations, we came to an agreement with the security groups that they will leave the capital soon. I don't know whether this will happen before or after Ramadan. I think it will happen after Ramadan.
He added that after this, There will only be city police officers, emergency police, and those who do criminal investigations. Now, you may think this is odd. Why isn't that already the case? That is Libya's interior minister, after all. He's negotiating with armed groups, urging them to leave the capital so that normal police forces can take over their duties. He also says he isn't sure when these militias will leave. Not exactly something you would expect from an interior minister. Well, here's some context. For years, Tripoli has been a hotbed for militias. There are a number of groups present. They have boring official-sounding names like General Security Force, Special Deterrence Force, Brigade 444 or Brigade 111. They sound official, but they're not. They do not take orders from the government in Tripoli. The militias have their own strongholds. That's where they unofficially handle security duties. These are located in different parts of the Libyan capital. They protect their areas almost like gangs protect their turf. And like with gangs, you often have fights break out between the various armed groups. And that happened last weekend. 10 people were killed in Tripoli's Abu Salim neighborhood. One of the militias is suspected, and that seems to have been the final straw. The United Nations has asked for an investigation, and that seems to have forced the government's hand. They concluded their negotiations with the militias, and the interior minister announced their withdrawal. But how did it come to this? Why has Tripoli been at the mercy of unofficial, heavily armed groups? Well, the various militias were formed around 2011 to protect their neighborhoods during the Libyan civil war, the war that began in 2011. It was part of the wider Arab Spring. Libyan rebels rose up against the long-serving autocrat Muammar Gaddafi. The rebels gained the support of NATO and the West, and with the help of NATO airstrikes, they won the war. Gaddafi was overthrown and killed in 2011. It was supposed to be a new dawn for Libya. Instead, it has been a nightmare. After they overthrew Gaddafi, the various rebel factions promptly began fighting against each other, and they eventually cleaved Libya into two. One half was run by an official UN-backed government. That government is based in the capital, Tripoli. That's why they don't want to anger the United Nations. They depend on this organization, the UN, for their legitimacy. And that's why they quickly worked to oust the militias. But this government only controls a part of Libya. The other half of the country is run by a parallel regime with a different prime minister and a different cabinet. This is backed by a general turned strongman, Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar. His faction controls most of the country, most of Libya. The two sides officially reached a truce in 2020. They were supposed to have merged by now for the good of Libyan citizens, but that hasn't really happened. They have kept their zones of control, and clashes erupt from time to time, almost like the situation with the militias who had carved up Tripoli. Libya's capital may be getting some peace soon, with the militias slated to leave by the end of Ramadan, but the whole country is still a powder keg. The pre-pandemic world was all about work from office. During the pandemic, it shifted to work from home. But in the post-pandemic world, a new work trend is a la mode. Work from a different country. And Japan is keeping up with the trend. It is offering what is called a digital nomad visa. What does it do? If you have such a visa, you can legally live and work remotely from anywhere in a country. The visa is valid for up to 6 months. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Our next story tells you why, also why Japan is offering this visa and which other countries do it.
Digital nomad visa. Have you heard of it? Think of it as a golden ticket. If a country gives it to you, you can legally live and work remotely from anywhere in the country. Now, Japan is offering one. It has introduced a digital nomad visa. It's scheduled to launch in March. But people are already going gaga, because this would mean working for any company anywhere in the world, but doing so while living in Japan, while sipping matcha tea or working underneath the cherry blossoms. And you don't have to do it alone. Visa holders can bring their spouses and children with them to Japan. If this sounds too good to be true, to some it might be. For starters, this is only a 6-month visa. Only workers who earn at least 10 million yen or $66,662 are eligible for it. Plus, remote workers from only 49 countries are eligible. Countries that have tax treaties and visa waiver agreements with Japan, like America, Australia, and Singapore. Unfortunately, India is not part of the list, so this digital nomad visa does not apply to Indians. Even so, to those who are eligible for the visa, this sounds like a good deal. But what's in it for Japan? On the global stage, the nation has a reputation of being closed off. It's stereotyped as a country that struggles to accept foreigners. So why is Japan offering digital nomad visas? For starters, Japan is already a hit among remote workers. Last year, Japan had over 3,000 remote workers. The nation is one of the top destinations for remote work. So Japan is tapping into that. It has a population crisis. Less babies are being born, and its workforce is aging. Japan hopes the digital nomads will boost the nation's workforce. On top of this, the island nation is hoping for more economic benefits. According to a 2023 survey, digital nomads contribute nearly $800 billion to the global economy annually. So Japan is hoping for some of that cash inflow, which is why it has set a high income requirement. When rich remote workers come in, they are bound to spend more money in Japan. But the island nation is not the only one dipping its toes in the nomadic visa waters. Estonia, Mexico, Portugal, Taiwan, and several others offer digital nomad visas as well. But there are differences, of course. In South Korea, the workers must earn at least $63,000. And they can stay for up to 2 years. Malaysia also has a 2-year limit, but here the individual's earnings can be lower. The worker should be earning at least $32,000 and must be employed in the digital field, like digital marketing. So the fine print differs, but digital nomad visas are popping up the world over. The world could truly be your oyster as long as you have the money for it.
Do you keep spinach in the fridge, forget about it, and then just buy some more? Do the avocados go bad before you get to them? Have you ever cooked a huge holiday meal only to have it go unfinished? If you said yes, you aren't alone. These are isolated incidents and may be uncommon in your household, but the big picture will blow your mind. Every year, roughly a third of the world's food goes to waste, 1/3. It is an astounding quantity of food, about 1.3 billion tons. So more than 1 billion tons of food is wasted every year, while nearly 740 million people face hunger globally. Now, some people want to change this. They want to reduce food waste by sending it from trash to tables. I'm talking about upcycled food. Upcycling is a fairly common practice, especially in vintage fashion or furniture. It means using leftover or reject materials to make new products. In the past decade, the technique has transformed how we eat. Now, upcycled food is having its moment. Seeds, peels, pulp, broth, nothing goes to waste. People are turning into heroes of zero-waste kitchens, making bourbons with apple peels, soup with leftover vegetables, or chips from juice pulp or potato peels. It is all about culinary creativity, and it has the world's attention. Now, food influencers are jumping on board. They're designing upcycled food recipes, cooking dishes to peppy music, showcasing the process on social media, gaining millions of followers and lucrative sponsorships. Upcycled food is a great business idea as well, so brands are popping up the world over. They take surplus food, edible food waste and food byproducts, then turn the waste into nutritious snacks, plant-based candy, and so much more. Upcycled food is a booming business. This industry is worth $54 billion. It is estimated to reach $97 billion by 2031. So this is a good start. And however small, it can be a savior. Much of our food waste ends up in landfills. It contributes to the most methane emissions, more than any other landfill matter. Food waste is terrible for climate change. Especially as the human population is growing, it is expected to reach 10 billion by 2050. The world's population, 10 billion by 2050. To meet the nutritional needs of such a huge population, the world needs to reduce food waste. But this crisis cannot be solved overnight, and upcycling startups and influencers cannot do it alone. Dealing with food waste needs a complete reform. From policy initiatives and optimized supply chains to more awareness and education, the biggest culprits need to step up. China wastes the most food in the world, more than 91 million tons, followed by India at 69 million tons. In these countries, the large population does play a role, but it can't be blamed completely. For instance, this is the third biggest contributor to food waste, Nigeria, at 38 million tons. This is a country where the level of hunger is high. Nearly 25 million Nigerians face food insecurity, yet this high level of wastage. So food waste problem is not a personal one, it's a policy issue. Yet only one country has a serious law against it, and that's South Korea. South Korea banned food scraps from landfills in 2005. Its residents are required to separate their waste and send the food waste to special facilities. Local governments have infrastructure to process it. Meanwhile, residents have to pay a small tax based on the amount of waste they create. This policy may raise some eyebrows, but in the past 2 decades, study after study has claimed that it works. The tax does not cost a lot. The average is $20 a year. Yet there has been a 20% reduction in the food waste, the food people waste. Plus, they buy less food and save money. So there is a net profit. Policies can make all the difference, you see. But then again, people play a role as well. Nearly half of the food waste occurs in homes, not farms, not manufacturing or food services. So it's time people upskill themselves, channel their creativity and get cracking on upcycled food. I know it's time for Vantage Shots, but before that, a quick reminder, the inaugural edition of the Firstpost Defence Summit is tomorrow. We'll be coming to you live from 3 p.m. IST, and we've got a lot of things lined up for you. An address by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, a conversation with India's Army Chief, and multiple panel discussions on warfare and security with experts and world leaders. We'll be looking at artificial intelligence and defense. We will analyze India's security concerns. We will also look at New Delhi's defense diplomacy and diversification. These are topics we regularly discuss on the show. But tomorrow, experts will decode them. It promises to be a set of lively discussions. So make sure you tune in from 3 p.m. IST, which is 9:30 a.m. GMT. Don't miss it. And finally, Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Sydney, 80,000 fans brave heavy thunderstorms to see Taylor Swift perform. In Paris, plastic waste is being turned into seats for Olympic venues. And a pilotless drone is aiming to collect climate data in remote Antarctica. We're also taking you back in history. On this day in 1954, a group of children in the US received the first injections of the new polio vaccine. It was developed by Jonas Salk. By 1959 to 1990, these countries were using the vaccine. By 21st century, polio cases were reduced by 99% worldwide. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't miss the Firstpost Defence Summit.